Skyrim has over 80 unique weapons, and every single one of them has a story, a hidden mechanic, or a design choice that most players completely overlook. So today, I'm breaking down every unique weapon in Elder Scrolls V, what makes each one special, and why some of them are way more powerful than you think. Starting with a mace that doesn't just hurt enemies, it destroys their ability to fight back. Mace of Molag Bal El. Every Daedric prince in Skyrim asks you to do something shady, but Molag Bal doesn't sugarcoat it. He's the most transactional prince in the entire game. You want his weapon? Sacrifice a follower on his altar during the quest near Markarth. Not clear a dungeon, not fetch an item. Kill someone who trusted you. That's the entry fee, and it sets the tone for what this mace actually is. The stats alone are intimidating. 20 base damage on a one-handed mace, which puts it in the same damage range as most two-handed weapons at equivalent tiers. But that power comes at a cost. Literally, it weighs 26 units, making it the heaviest one-handed mace in Skyrim. Your inventory feels it every time you pick this thing up. But here's where it gets interesting, and it's the part almost everyone misses. The enchantment isn't just absorb health. It fires a 3-part debuff on every single hit. It drains 25 stamina, absorbs health from the target, and heals you simultaneously, all at once. One swing, 3 effects. Now, most players fixate on the health absorption because healing while attacking sounds incredible, and it is. But the stamina drain is the real monster here. Strip an enemy's stamina to 0 and you've completely disabled their power attacks and sprinting. That's devastating against dragons, giants, and high-level warriors who rely on burst damage to kill you. You're not just hitting them, you're dismantling their entire combat strategy swing by swing. Speedrunners figured this out years ago. In mid-game content, disabling power attacks is functionally more valuable than raw healing because it removes the only thing that can actually kill you quickly. The health absorb keeps you alive. The stamina drain makes sure nothing can threaten you in the first place. But if you think a mace that cripples your enemies is impressive, wait until you see a dagger that skips the fight entirely. Mehrunes' Razor. On paper, Mehrunes' Razor is one of the most embarrassing weapons in Skyrim. 11 base damage. 11. You can find iron daggers in Whiterun that hit harder than an ancient Daedric artifact forged by the Prince of Destruction himself. But here's the thing, that base damage number is a lie, because this dagger doesn't care about damage, it cares about probability. Every single hit you land with Mehrunes' Razor has a chance to instantly kill whatever you're fighting. No resistance check, no saving throw, no health threshold. Just dead. Dragon with thousands of health? Dead. Named boss you've been chipping away at for 5 minutes? Dead. The weapon doesn't ask how tough your enemy is. It asks how lucky you are. But here's where the myth and reality split. You'll see guides and forum posts hyping this proc rate like it triggers constantly. It doesn't. Community testing across thousands and thousands of recorded hits puts the actual instant kill chance at roughly 2%. That's it. 1 in 50 swings, give or take. Not exactly the death machine some people make it sound like. 2% is still terrifying when you think about what it applies to. There are 0 exceptions. Dragons, Daedric lords, legendary difficulty bosses, it doesn't matter. A single lucky proc mid-fight ends an encounter that was supposed to take minutes. You're chipping away at an Elder Dragon's health bar, swing number 37 connects, and the thing just drops out of the sky. No fanfare, no dramatic finish. Just math doing something math shouldn't be allowed to do. And because it weighs only 4 units, there's literally no reason not to carry it. Dual wield it alongside your main weapon. Pull it out when you're feeling lucky, and treat every fight like a slot machine with a jackpot that kills gods. The community is genuinely split on this one. Some players love the lottery. Lore purists argue that a legendary Daedric relic shouldn't feel like scratching a lottery ticket at a gas station. But at least Mehrunes' Razor only kills things. The next weapon on this list was specifically designed to make sure they stay dead. Dawnbreaker, a Daedric prince, hands you a weapon of holy light and tells you to go purge the undead. If that sounds contradictory, that's because it absolutely is. And it's exactly what makes Dawnbreaker one of the most interesting weapons in Skyrim. Meridia doesn't wait for you to find her. She summons you. You're wandering near Kilcreath ruins at level 12 or higher, and suddenly a voice booms from the sky, demanding you restore her beacon. No subtle quest marker, no journal entry you accidentally stumble into. A Daedric prince literally yells at you from the heavens. It's one of the most theatrical quest introductions in the entire game, and players have been mocking and loving it in equal measure for over a decade. Here's where the weapon itself gets misunderstood. You pick up Dawnbreaker, see a base damage of 12, and think it's garbage. That number is a trap. Every single hit applies 15 points of fire damage on top of that base, which already pushes your effective damage to 27 per swing. But the real power isn't the fire at all. Any undead enemy with less than 50 health gets instantly killed. No saving throw, no resistance resistance check, no chance to dodge. It just fires. And here's the part that makes this weapon quietly essential. Roughly 40% of Skyrim's dungeons are packed with undead. Draugr crypts, vampire lairs, necromancer dens. You're triggering that instant kill constantly, clearing rooms that would otherwise eat through your potions and patience. One thing players get wrong is assuming the fire damage and the instant kill work together. They don't. The instant kill is a completely separate mechanic that checks the target's remaining health independently. The fire doesn't feed into it. After you drop an undead enemy, nearby corpses briefly reanimate for about 30 seconds, turning into chaotic meat shields that absorb hits meant for you. On top of that, the sword gives passive disease resistance, and glows bright enough to replace a torch in dark dungeons. It's a Daedric artifact designed to destroy Daedric corruption, handed to you by the only Daedric prince who actively opposes her own kind. But if Dawnbreaker is a weapon of contradiction, the next one is a weapon of pure, unfiltered brutality. Volendrung. You can get this weapon at level 9. Level 9. Most players haven't even cleared their first dungeon by then, and Volendrung is sitting there waiting for you with the highest base damage of any one-handed weapon in the entire game. 27 base damage. That's not a typo. For reference, most one-handed swords are sitting somewhere in the low teens at that point in your playthrough. Volendrung hits harder than weapons you won't find for another 50 hours of gameplay. Complete the Cursed Tribe quest at an orc stronghold, and Malakath hands you what is essentially a endgame stat stick before you've even figured out how shouts work. But here's the catch that keeps it from being a pure power fantasy freebie. This thing weighs 22 units. That's heavier than most two-handed weapons in the game. You're carrying a one-handed warhammer that eats nearly a quarter of a low-level character's carry weight just by existing in your inventory. So yeah, you feel that trade-off every single time you open your menu and wonder why you can't pick up another set of armor. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the base damage isn't actually the real story. The enchantment drains 50 magicka per hit. 50. Swing twice at a mage and they're running on fumes. 3 hits and they're functionally silenced, standing there with an empty magicka bar, unable to cast, unable to heal, unable to conjure anything to save themselves. They just become a person in a robe holding a stick. Against regular bandits, sure, that doesn't matter much. But against Thalmor battle mages, against the high-level enemies you encounter at the College of Winterhold, it completely breaks their combat loop. These enemies are designed around cycling through devastating spells, and Volendrung just turns that off. They go from the most dangerous enemies in any encounter to the most helpless. The orc community has basically claimed this weapon as their own, and honestly, it makes sense. Malakath is the Daedric prince of outcasts, oaths, and curses. Volendrung is thematically the weapon of everyone who got pushed to the margins and decided to push back harder. Tasha orc build players have argued for years that it should have been a faction reward tied to the strongholds rather than a standard Daedric artifact quest. But regardless of how you feel about its placement in the quest structure, the magicka drain alone makes it one of the most underrated sustained utility tools in Skyrim. Mages don't stop showing up in late-game content. They get more frequent and more powerful, and Volendrung just keeps answering that problem with 2 swings and silence. But if you think a weapon that shuts down mages is unsettling, wait until you hear about a blade that gets stronger the more people you betray. Ebony Blade. Here's a weapon that most Skyrim players have never even held, and that's not an exaggeration. The Ebony Blade is hidden behind one of the most obscure quest triggers in the entire game. So a quest called the Whispering Door that requires a specific set of conditions most players will never stumble into naturally. You need to have completed the main quest to a certain point, reached a specific level, and then a courier just shows up out of nowhere with a mysterious note. No quest marker pointing you there. No NPC screaming about it in a tavern. The game basically hopes you figure it out on your own, and the community had to data mine the trigger conditions just to understand how it works. But here's where it gets interesting. The weapon you get from all that effort, it starts underwhelming. Base damage of 18 as a two-handed sword, which is honestly nothing special. It drains health on every hit, which is nice, but plenty of enchantments do that. If you stopped there, you'd toss it in a chest and forget about it. That would be a massive mistake. The Ebony Blade is the only weapon in Skyrim that scales with kills. Every NPC you cut down with this thing adds damage, stacking up to 30 additional points on top of that base 18. That means a fully powered Ebony Blade hits for 48 damage, the highest ceiling of any weapon in the game. No smithing exploit, no enchanting loop, just you and a blade that remembers every single thing you've done with it. But reaching that 48 requires commitment. You can't just grind bandits for an afternoon. This is a weapon that demands an entire playthrough of deliberate, sustained use. It grows with you, rewards loyalty to it, and punishes players who constantly swap gear chasing the next shiny thing. Nothing else in Skyrim works like that. The lore makes it even stranger. It's categorized as a Daedric artifact, but the game never explicitly names which Daedric prince created it. That ambiguity feels intentional, Like, even the developers wanted this weapon to feel like something that shouldn't quite exist. But if the Ebony Blade is Skyrim's best-kept offensive secret, the next entry might be its best-kept defensive one, Spellbreaker. If you've ever looked at Spellbreaker and thought, oh cool, a shield that blocks fire and lightning, you've been using about half of what this thing actually does. And that's being generous. Spellbreaker is a Daedric artifact you pick up from Peryite's quest, The Only Cure. Peryite, for the record, is the Daedric Prince of Pestilence and Natural Order, and he's probably the most ignored prince in the entire pantheon. Nobody's writing fan fiction about the god of disease. But his artifact? Quietly one of the most broken defensive tools in the game. On paper, it's a shield, base armor rating of 18. Nothing that's going to blow your mind. But here's where the enchantment changes everything. Spellbreaker reflects 50% of all incoming spell damage back to the caster. Not just destruction magic. All of it. Destruction, restoration, illusion, conjuration, alteration, every single school of magic in the game gets bounced back at whoever threw it. That distinction matters way more than you'd think. A mage fires a fireball at you while you're blocking with Spellbreaker, and they eat half their own damage. A necromancer tries to drain your life force, and the spell punishes them for casting it. Enemy conjurers, illusionists, anyone slinging any kind of magic at you is actively hurting themselves every time they attack. Thus, you're not just defending, you're turning their offense into your offense. But the real build potential is what makes this shield legendary. Pair Spellbreaker with a Breton character, and you're stacking the 50% spell reflection on top of the Breton's innate 25% magic resistance, plus their dragon skin ability. You're looking at roughly 85% total magic resistance in practice. That's not tanky, that's functionally immune. Dragons breathing fire at you becomes a mild inconvenience. Archmages become target practice. The entire magic system in Skyrim basically stops applying to you. And the wildest part is that most players never realize any of this because they grabbed Spellbreaker once, blocked a couple of frost spells, and moved on thinking it was a niche destruction counter. It's not niche, it's universal magic denial strapped to your arm, or you're gifted to you by the one Daedric prince nobody pays attention to. But if you think a shield that breaks magic is strange for a weapon video, wait until you see what a rose can do. Sanguine Rose. Every other Daedric quest in Skyrim wants you to feel the weight of dealing with a god. Molag Bal breaks you. Mehrunes Dagon tests your loyalty. Sanguine takes you on a pub crawl and lets you wake up in a temple with a stolen goat. The quest A Night to Remember kicks off when a stranger named Sam Gaven challenges you to a drinking contest in a random tavern. You black out. You wake up having apparently trashed a temple, married a hagraven, and stolen livestock from a giant. The entire questline is you retracing your steps through this disaster, apologizing to everyone you wronged while hammered, and slowly realizing that Sam is actually Sanguine, the Daedric prince of debauchery, who did all of this because he thought it would be funny. And honestly, he's right. It is funny. But here's where the punchline turns into something genuinely powerful. When Sanguine reveals himself, he hands you the Sanguine Rose almost as an afterthought, like a party favor. The tone makes you think it's a gag gift. It is. Absolutely not a gag gift. The Sanguine Rose summons a Dremora Lord for 60 seconds. That Dremora has roughly 500 HP, swings with melee damage comparable to a level 30 warrior, and immediately draws enemy aggression the moment it appears. 3 charges per day, no soul gems needed, just point and fire. You get a personal tank on demand. This works for literally every build in the game simultaneously. Melee characters summon it to split enemy focus, so they're not getting swarmed. Yin archers let the Dremora absorb hits, while they pick targets from range. Mages use it to break enemy aggression cycles so they can reposition and cast without getting interrupted. It weighs 9 units, which is absurdly light for a Daedric artifact, so there's zero reason not to carry it alongside your primary weapon. The joke is that Sanguine treats the whole interaction like you're a mild amusement in his afternoon. He doesn't monologue about power or demand sacrifice. He just laughs, hands you a staff, and vanishes. And that staff quietly becomes one of the most reliable utility tools in the entire game. New players dismiss it because the quest felt like a joke. Veterans know better. But if you think Sanguine's gift is chaotic, wait until you meet the Daedric prince who made chaos his entire personality, Wabbajack. There is no weapon in Skyrim that respects you less than the Wabbajack. And that's exactly why it's brilliant. To even get your hands on it, you need to complete one of the strangest quests Bethesda ever designed. The Mind of Madness doesn't take place in a dungeon or a ruin. It takes place inside the mind of Pelagius III, the dead High King of Skyrim, where Sheogorath, the Daedric prince of madness himself, is just hanging out having a tea party. You navigate frozen nightmares, childhood trauma, and paranoid delusions, all while Sheogorath cracks jokes. And you're your reward for surviving this fever dream is a staff that might help you, might kill your enemy, or might turn a Draugr Deathlord into a sweet roll. That's not an exaggeration. The Wabbajack pulls from a pool of over 32 different random outcomes every single time you fire it, healing you, summoning a Dremora, transforming an enemy into a chicken, causing a random explosion, instant death. There is zero consistency and zero pattern, and here's where it gets interesting. Bethesda has never published the probability distribution for those outcomes. Community testers have spent years cataloging thousands of uses trying to map approximate frequencies, but nothing is confirmed. The weapon associated with the God of Madness has mechanics that are, fittingly, impossible to fully understand. But the chaos isn't just funny, it's genuinely powerful. Some outcomes temporarily convert enemies into allies through a random transmutation effect that exists nowhere else in Skyrim's combat system. 1 second you're fighting a bandit chief, the next second he's fighting for you. That mechanic alone can trivialize encounters that the game clearly designed to be difficult. Therefore, speedrunners actually exploit the Wabbajack to sequence break encounters that would otherwise require specific builds or gear. A weapon that turns people into food is also a competitive tool. Those two facts coexisting tells you everything you need to know. And because charges regenerate naturally after 24 in-game hours, you functionally have unlimited ammunition if you're patient. No soul gems, no recharging. Just wait a day, and the madness reloads itself. Players tend to fall into two camps with this thing. They either love it because the chaos is genuinely hilarious, or they hate it because you can't rely on it when it matters. Both reactions are completely valid because the Wabbajack is the only weapon in Skyrim that was designed to be unreliable. That's not a flaw, that's the entire point. But if you think a weapon powered by pure randomness is unsettling, wait until you see what Vermina built out of Stolen Dreams. Skull of Corruption. Every weapon in Skyrim gets weaker the longer a fight drags on. Your stamina drains, your enchantment charges deplete, your potions run out. The Skull of Corruption does the exact opposite, and that's what makes it one of the most misunderstood weapons in the entire game. You get it from Vermina, the Daedric Prince of Nightmares and Prophetic Dreams, through a quest called Waking Nightmare. The setup is genuinely unsettling. An entire town is being psychologically tormented because a priest fell asleep in Vermina's temple and essentially became a broadcast tower for nightmares. You have to enter his dreamscape to stop it, and your reward is this staff that looks like it was carved from a fever dream. But here's where players get tripped up. The base damage is 16, which matches master level destruction staves right out of the gate. Solid numbers. The unique mechanic, though, is where things get interesting. Each proc absorbs 25 health from the target and transfers it directly to you, not a regeneration buff, not a heal over time tick, a direct vampiric transfer ripped from the enemy and dumped into your health bar on the spot. Here's the thing. The proc requires you to have previously absorbed at least 25 health before it triggers again, and that creates what is essentially a disguised cooldown, and this is the part that confuses everyone. Players try the staff, notice the health steal doesn't fire every single hit, and assume it's bugged or underperforming. It's not. It's gating you behind a resource you've already earned. The practical result is something no other weapon in Skyrim replicates. The longer your fight runs, the more health you accumulate. Most combat in this game is a race against depletion. Your resources drain, the enemy's resources drain, and whoever hits 0 first loses. The Skull of Corruption flips that entirely. Extended combat makes you harder to kill rather than more vulnerable. Magic-focused players routinely dismiss it because the mechanic is never explained in-game. 0 tooltip clarity, 0 contextual hints. But community consensus is actively shifting. Marathon dungeon runners are increasingly rating it as the strongest staff for sustained play because the health steal compounds over time, turning what looks like a mid-tier destruction staff into a survival engine. But if the skull rewards patience, the next weapon rewards something completely different. Pure, immediate, frost-coated aggression. Chillrend. No Daedric Prince. No ancient prophecy. No quest that sends you across 5 holds collecting fragments of a legendary blade. Chillrend is sitting in Pinemoon Cave, waiting for anyone level 18 or above to just walk in and grab it. And honestly, it might outperform half the weapons on this list. Here's the thing. Chillrend doesn't care about your expectations. 1, it's a frost sword with 15 base damage and 20 points of frost damage on every single hit. That frost stacks cumulatively, meaning the longer you're swinging, the colder your target gets. But the real trick kicks in once you've chipped an enemy below 50% health. At that threshold, your hits stun them for 2 to 3 seconds. That doesn't sound like much until you realize what it actually interrupts. Power attacks get cancelled. Spellcasts get cut off mid-animation. Melee-heavy enemies just stop functioning. But here's where it gets genuinely nasty. Because the frost damage compounds on already frozen targets, and because the stun triggers repeatedly below that health threshold, you can create a cascading freeze loop. Hit, stun, hit again before the stun wears off. Stun again. Against the right enemy, they literally never get another swing in. You're not fighting them anymore. You're just watching them freeze in place while their health bar disappears. No ceremony, no ritual, no moral choice at a shrine. You walk into a cave, you kill some Draugr, you pick up a sword that turns combat into a rhythm game. But there's a catch that genuinely bothers part of the community. Chillrend isn't actually unique. Multiple copies exist in the game world. You can find one, buy another from a vendor after level 20, and suddenly you're holding two of a weapon that's supposed to be a named, one-of-a-kind artifact. For a game that builds mystique around legendary items, having duplicates floating around kind of undercuts the fantasy. Some players don't care because the performance speaks for itself. And others feel like it cheapens the whole concept of a unique weapon, and that's the real tension with Chillrend. It's accessible, reliable, devastating in practice, and completely devoid of prestige. It's the weapon you use when you want results, instead of a story. But if you want a weapon that delivers both results and a story, the Nightingale Bow has something to say about that Nightingale Bow. If you're an archery build in Skyrim, you already know the game doesn't exactly roll out the red carpet for you. Melee gets the flashy kill cams, magic gets the spectacle, and you're sitting on a ridge 200 yards away doing the actual work while nobody watches. But here's the thing, the game quietly handed you one of the most efficient weapons in the entire arsenal, and it buried it behind an optional questline that combat-focused players skip without thinking twice. The Nightingale Bow is your reward for completing Trinity Restored in the Thieves Guild questline, and it only appears at its full potential if you're level 30 or higher when you finish it. That timing matters. By the time this bow is in your hands, you've invested serious hours into a faction story that has nothing to do with combat on the surface, but the payoff is a bow with 19 base damage, a weight of only 7 units, making it the lightest artifact bow in the game, and an enchantment that does something no other bow can match. Chaos damage. Every single arrow applies fire, frost, and shock damage simultaneously. One arrow, 3 damage types, every shot. The combined elemental output on a clean hit pushes past 60 damage before resistance calculations even enter the equation. That's not a gimmick. That's single-shot DPS that outperforms nearly every other bow in the game, and you're doing it from stealth at range where enemies can't touch you. But the part that genuinely doesn't get enough attention is the wall penetration. Arrows fired from the Nightingale Bow at specific angles can pass through certain surfaces. That's not a bug that got patched. It's a mechanical quirk that completely changes how you approach positioning. You can set up ambush shots through geometry that would block any standard bow. So creative players who learn the angles turn this into a tactical advantage that feels like it belongs in a completely different game. It tempers with ebony ingots and scales directly with the archery skill tree, so every perk point you invest makes it proportionally stronger. The bow grows with you. It rewards commitment to the build rather than asking you to abandon it for something flashier. The community argument that this weapon deserved more visibility is legitimate. Burying a top-tier archery weapon behind an optional stealth faction questline means the players who would benefit most from it are often the ones who never find it. But that's the Nightingale Bow in a nutshell. Quiet, efficient, devastating if you know where to look. But if you think the Thieves Guild is the only faction hiding a weapon worth killing for, wait until you see what the Dark Brotherhood put in your hands. Blade of Woe. Every listener of the Dark Brotherhood carried this dagger, and every single one of them earned it the same way by taking it from the previous listener's corpse. That's the cycle. The blade doesn't get passed down through ceremony or tradition. It gets passed down through murder. You don't inherit the Blade of Woe. You claim it, and when you complete Hail Sithis, and the Brotherhood's questline reaches its blood-soaked conclusion, the blade becomes yours. Not as loot, not as a random drop, as a gift from the organization's patron, a personal acknowledgement that you are now the listener. That kind of narrative weight matters, because it makes the weapon feel earned in a way that most unique weapons in Skyrim simply don't. But here's where it gets interesting. Most players pick up the Blade of Woe, see 12 base damage and a 5-point absorb health enchantment, and immediately toss it in a chest back at the Sanctuary. 12 damage on a dagger? That's nothing. That's a letter opener. Why would you use this over literally any Daedric weapon? Because you're not supposed to use one, you're supposed to use two. The Blade of Woe can be dual wielded, and this is where the math starts breaking the game. 2 blades means 10 points of health absorption per dual strike combination. Each blade weighs only 4 units, so your combined dual wield loadout is 8 units total, lighter than most single artifact weapons in the game. Heavy armor builds can carry both without even noticing the weight, but the real payoff is the sustain loop. When you're swinging both blades at full speed, the health you're stealing back keeps pace with or flat out exceeds incoming damage at moderate difficulty levels. You're not just dealing damage, you're healing through every fight in real time. No potions, items, no restoration spells, no pausing to eat 17 wheels of cheese. Just constant, uninterrupted vampiric pressure that turns you into a walking drain on everything around you. The community figured this out years ago, and the consensus is pretty definitive. Dual-wielding Blades of Woe trivializes melee combat more than any other single weapon combination in the game, more than Daedric artifacts, more than enchanted Dragonbone setups. In two daggers that nobody looks twice at individually become the most broken sustain engine Skyrim has ever produced. The gap between how this weapon looks on paper and how it actually performs might be the biggest in the entire game. Only if you committed to the Brotherhood, only if you walked the listener's path, and only if you were smart enough to pick up two instead of one. Speaking of weapons that demand commitment to a specific path, the companions have their own legendary reward waiting at the end of their questline, and it belonged to the most important figure in Nord history, Wuthrad. Every weapon on this list came from a deal. A Daedric prince summoned you, offered power, and asked for something ugly in return. You killed, you betrayed, you sacrificed, and in exchange, you got an artifact dripping with supernatural force. Wuthrad is different. This is Ysgramor's axe, not a replica, not an homage. The actual battle axe carried by the man who founded the Nord people, who led the 500 companions across the Sea of Ghosts after the Snow Elves massacred his people at Sarthal. That single event reshaped the entire history of Tamriel. Elves lost the continent. Humans claimed Skyrim. And the weapon that led that charge is the one you're holding. You get it by completing Glory of the Dead, the final quest in the companion's storyline. But here's what matters about that. Nobody gives it to you as a favor. You earn the title of Harbinger, leader of the oldest warrior brotherhood in Skyrim, a faction that predates every kingdom, every jarl, every institution you encounter in the game. And this is what they hand you. Stat-wise, it's a two-handed battle axe with a base damage of 24. Respectable, not earth-shattering. You can temper it with Orcish ingots, meaning it scales with your investment and stays relevant deep into the late game. But the enchantment is where people get confused. The actual effect, verified in the game's data, deals bonus damage specifically to elves. Altmer, Bosmer, Dunmer, Falmer, all Mer races take extra punishment from this weapon. Given that Wuthrad was literally forged to fight elves, that's not a random enchantment. That's history encoded into steel. And that's the real conversation. Players debate endlessly whether the companion's questline rewards are intentionally weaker than Daedric artifacts, and they're asking the wrong question entirely. Wuthrad doesn't compete on the same axis. Every other weapon in this video was transactional. A prince offered power. You paid a price, you walked away stronger. Wuthrad is the only weapon you earned through loyalty, through brotherhood, through proving yourself worthy of a legacy that stretches back to the founding of civilization itself. No Daedric prince handed this to you. No shrine summoned you. No moral compromise was required. For a certain kind of player, that weight, that history, that meaning is the most powerful thing a weapon can be. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every armor set in Elden Ring explained, click the video on the screen now.